I'm 22 now, but for the first 15 years of my life, I was introduced to the world as someone I wasn't. When I was 6, I tried calling my mother Mom at the grocery store. She bent down to my level and whispered sharply, "You don't call me that in public. I'm Auntie Megan, remember?" I nodded, confused, and went back to pushing the little cart she gave me to stay distracted. Whenever we went anywhere, it was always the same. Megan, my actual mother, would introduce me as her niece. "This is my sister's daughter, Fallon," she'd say with a bright, practiced smile. I had to smile too. That was part of the routine. She never talked about my dad. When I asked, she would change the subject or pretend she didn't hear me. Once, in 3rd grade, I pushed harder. She snapped, said it was complicated, and that I shouldn't bring it up again. We lived alone in a 2-bedroom rental, in a small town. It was just the 2 of us, but she never let me put up family photos at school. My About Me poster in 2nd grade had to say I lived with my aunt. When the teacher asked why, I just shrugged. Extended family events were rare. When they did happen, I had to go with Megan's older sister, Claire. Claire would pick me up, brush my hair, and make me call her mom around everyone. I didn't like it. Her hugs were stiff, and she never remembered my birthday. Claire acted like I belonged to her. At church, school meetings, even a dentist appointment once, I had to sit next to Claire while she signed in as my mother. All my school records had her last name on them. Megan handled the paperwork in secret and said it was just easier this way. When I was 14, my school counselor called me in after a group presentation where I talked about my aunt. She asked why I never mentioned my parents. I got nervous, then defensive, and eventually just shut down the conversation. She didn't push, but she watched me differently after that. One night, I was digging through a drawer looking for a flashlight. I found a small envelope with my name written in cursive. Inside was a folded piece of paper, my birth certificate. It listed my full name, my birth date, and Megan as my mother. The space for father was blank. I waited until the weekend to bring it up. Megan looked at me for a long time, then said it was a legal mix-up from when she was very young. She didn't explain further. That was the end of the conversation. After that, things changed. I stopped calling Claire Mom. I stopped calling Megan Auntie. I didn't say anything else, but I started to pull away. Megan didn't force the names again, but she became stricter about my online presence. She deleted my Facebook account when I used her last name. When college application season came, everything became a mess. All my records were under Claire's name, and every form had to go through her. Megan acted like it was normal. She filled things out like it was her right. I wanted to scream, but I kept quiet. The confirmation came in the most unexpected way. Megan's mother, my grandmother, was in the hospital for a short stay. While I visited, she looked at me and said, "Megan was just a kid when she had you, barely more than a child herself." Then she fell asleep, but it was all I needed to hear. A few weeks later, Megan called to invite me to her 20th wedding anniversary party. I didn't want to go, but then she mentioned it was a formal event, over 100 guests, speeches, toasts, the whole thing. Something in me snapped into focus. I told her I'd be there, and that was when I started planning what I'd say. The whole thing still didn't make sense. Why pretend? Why build a fake life around a lie? I started digging. Megan had me at 17, while Claire had been married for years and trying to fix a shaky marriage. From what I could gather, Claire offered to take care of things. Megan never fought it. They raised me like a secret. Claire got the spotlight as the perfect mother, while Megan got to keep her academic job in a conservative university town. I was the living, breathing alibi that made Claire's life look fuller, more stable. I was a prop, and they both used me. My boyfriend, who I'd been dating for almost a year, had never met Megan. I always gave vague excuses. One night, I told him everything. He sat silently, then just said, "You're going to tell them, aren't you?" I decided to, and not quietly. The day before the party, I printed 2 versions of a speech, one they were expecting, and one that finally told the truth. I tucked the real one in my bag. The only thing I couldn't get rid of was the image that had burned into my brain, an old photo my grandmother had once mailed me. Megan, wearing a hospital gown, holding a newborn baby with swollen eyes and a hollow stare. Me. That was the moment I stopped wondering if I was overreacting. They lied. For years. And at that anniversary party, I was going to say it out loud. I RSVP'd yes to the anniversary party the same day Megan sent the invite. I didn't ask questions. I thanked her, told her I'd be there, and kept it simple. I didn't want to give anyone a reason to get suspicious. The party was being held at a vineyard about 2 hours from where I lived. Formal dress code. Megan reminded me over text to wear something appropriate, nothing too dark, nothing too bright, and definitely nothing attention-grabbing. I told her I'd figure it out. Then I bought a deep navy dress, sleek and simple, but not what she would have picked. A week later, I got an email from Megan. They were putting together a list of people to speak during the dinner, and asked if I'd do a short tribute since I was part of the family. Her exact words were a few kind words, light and loving. I replied yes again, but I already knew I wasn't reading what she thought I would. That night, I sat at my laptop and wrote 2 speeches. One was full of what she expected, stories about family dinners, memories of childhood, gratitude. The other started with a question, why would a mother hide her daughter in plain sight for 15 years? I saved both and kept the second one password protected. The next time I saw my therapist, I told her the entire plan. She didn't tell me not to do it. She just said, make sure you're ready for what comes after. I booked another session for the following week. 3 days before the party, Claire called. I let it go to voicemail. Her voice was calm, but the words weren't. Just a reminder, she said, let's not rehash old misunderstandings. This weekend is about love and family. I didn't call back. Instead, I scheduled a consultation with a lawyer I found online, someone who specialized in name corrections and identity documentation. I told her the story. She said it would be tricky but doable. I'd need to submit a notarized copy of my birth certificate and possibly get a formal affidavit declaring the circumstances. I booked a follow-up for the week after the party. I also emailed my old high school. I told them I needed to correct student records for college verification. They They asked for proof of guardianship and clarification from the listed parent, Claire. I didn't respond yet. I was waiting to make it public first. 2 days before the party, a letter came in the mail. Handwritten address, no return name. Inside was a folded card and a photograph. The card was from my grandmother, Megan and Claire's mother. She apologized for staying quiet for so long. The photo was a grainy print of Megan, no older than 17, lying in a hospital bed and holding a newborn. No one else was in the picture. Later that evening, I called a cousin I still spoke to sometimes. I didn't give much away, but I asked if she remembered anything strange about when I was little. She paused, then said, I always thought it was weird how no one ever mentioned your dad, and Claire didn't look pregnant before you showed up. She didn't push further, but that was enough. Through a college friend who worked in university archives, I got access to a faculty roster from 23 years ago at Megan's university. One name stood out, a married professor who left abruptly the year Megan got pregnant. I wasn't going to track him down. I just wanted to confirm the timeline. It fit. I looked through an old shoebox of documents I had kept since I was 16. My fake school ID with Claire's last name. My actual birth certificate. A few printouts of emails Megan sent to school counselors pretending to be a concerned aunt. I put them in a folder. Not for the speech, but just in case. I kept thinking about my boyfriend. I hadn't told him everything until now. We were having dinner the night before the party. I laid it out in order. He listened. Then he asked, what are you going to say up there? I pulled out the paper. He read the first line and looked up. You're serious? Yeah. He didn't try to stop me. That night, I heard from the same cousin again. She said one of the older uncles had once asked Claire whose kid I really was, and got shut down so fast it caused an argument that lasted years. She said some people in the family had always suspected, but no one wanted to say it out loud. The morning of the anniversary, I printed the final version of my real speech at a corner shop near my apartment. I folded it cleanly, slid it into a leather pouch, and placed it at the bottom of my purse. I zipped it shut, stood in front of the mirror in my navy dress, and for the first time, called myself by my real name, out loud, just once. Then I grabbed my keys and headed out. The party was waiting. So was everything I had never been allowed to say. The vineyard was set up like a movie set, rows of white chairs, strings of lights above the tables, and flower arrangements that looked professionally done. There were over 100 guests, some in suits, others in cocktail dresses, all moving from table to table with wine glasses in hand. Megan wore a fitted cream gown and stayed close to her husband, who looked like he belonged on a university board. Servers walked around offering champagne. A band played soft jazz. I kept my purse close and didn't take off my coat until the sun dipped behind the hills. Megan and Claire didn't come over. Instead, one of Claire's sons waved me over to the family table and said, "Your mom saved you a seat." He meant Claire. I nodded and sat down without correcting him. During the cocktail hour, I watched people approach Claire and compliment her. "Your daughter looks beautiful," one of them said. Claire smiled and thanked them. Megan stood across the lawn, laughing with her in-laws like nothing in the world could touch her. Then came the slideshow. Someone dimmed the lights. The first image was of Megan and her husband on their wedding day. Then came photos of vacations, family holidays, and eventually pictures of me as a baby, in Claire's arms. Claire narrating softly beside the screen, pointing out how much I'd grown. I sat there, frozen, watching myself erased in real time. When Megan got up to speak, she thanked everyone who's been there since day one. She called out cousins, neighbors, even old professors. But not me. Not once. Right before the speeches started, Claire leaned over and said quietly, "Don't embarrass the family." She looked back at the crowd, like nothing had happened. A few minutes later, they called my name. The microphone was already in place. I walked slowly to the front of the room, unfolded the page from my purse, and smiled. I started with the version everyone expected. A short joke about Megan's cooking. A vague compliment about family being complicated but important. People smiled. A few chuckled politely. Then I turned the page. Actually, there's something else I want to share. The room quieted. I spent most of my life being told to pretend that I was Claire's daughter, that Megan was just my aunt, that this lie was necessary, for appearances, for reputations, for stability. Someone at the back said, "What? But Megan isn't my aunt. She's my mother. She gave birth to me when she was 17 and was told to disappear so no one would be embarrassed." Claire took me and called me hers. Megan watched it happen and went along with it. There were gasps. Claire stood up, but I kept speaking. I'm not saying this to cause a scene. I'm saying this because I won't sit here and be erased. Not again. I am not a footnote in someone else's story. I reached into my purse and pulled out two things: a copy of my birth certificate with Megan's name listed as my mother, and a photo in a simple silver frame. It showed Megan in a hospital bed holding a newborn, her face pale, her eyes swollen. I held both up. This is me. And that is the truth. A woman near the front covered her mouth. Someone whispered, "I always wondered." Megan didn't move. She was still in her chair, hands on her lap. Claire started to speak, but her voice cracked. I looked at the guests one more time, thanked them for listening, and walked off the small stage. I didn't wait for applause. I didn't wait for dessert. I walked straight across the lawn, through the back entrance of the building, and out to the parking lot. I called a cab while I was walking. As it pulled in, I glanced back once. Megan's husband had pulled her aside. Claire stood alone. People were still seated, but no one was smiling anymore. I didn't go home immediately. I asked the driver to take the long way. I needed time. The next morning, my phone lit up with messages from extended family, some from cousins I hadn't heard from in years. People were confused, some supportive, some shocked. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I uploaded a short blog post. I didn't link it to any of my social media accounts. I just emailed it to a few trusted relatives and told them to forward it if they wanted to. It explained everything, start to finish. I attached a scan of the birth certificate, the hospital photo, and copies of a few school records that showed Claire listed as my mother. I ended the post with a sentence that read, "You're allowed to decide what you believe. I just wanted the truth on record." Finally. By the afternoon, someone from the party had already shared the link. The story was spreading. I shut off my phone. It was done. I said what I came to say. Megan didn't say goodbye at the party. As soon as I left the stage, she slipped out the back door of the venue. A few guests noticed, but no one stopped her. Her husband stood alone for a few minutes, looking around as if he'd just been dropped into a completely different event. The band stopped midway through their next set. The servers started clearing plates before the main course was served. People began leaving quietly, some pretending they had early mornings, others not bothering with excuses. Megan's husband walked over to Claire. He didn't raise his voice, but he didn't look calm either. He asked why I would say something that's specific if it wasn't true. Claire waved it off, told him I was confused, unstable, had always had trouble separating fact from fiction, that I must have misunderstood things as a child and was trying to make sense of them now, poorly. It didn't land. Before Claire could say more, Aunt Denise, Megan's oldest cousin, spoke up from across the table. She said she remembered Megan going away for several months when she was 17 and coming back looking thinner, quieter, and different. Another uncle joined in. He remembered when Claire suddenly showed up at a family gathering with a newborn, me, and how everyone assumed it was an adoption from a distant relative. The baby didn't look like Claire or her husband. Within an hour, more than half the guests had left. Some hugged Claire stiffly. Some avoided her completely. The celebration was over 2 hours before it was scheduled to end. I drove home without turning on the radio. I didn't stop for food or answer any calls. I kept replaying my own voice in my head, the sound of the crowd going quiet, Claire trying to get up from her chair. When I got to my apartment, someone was already there. My uncle, Megan's brother, Sam, was sitting on the stairs outside my door. He didn't ask questions. He just said, "Was it true?" I unlocked the door and let him in. He sat down at the table and started remembering a night at Claire's house 15 years earlier. A Christmas party. He'd walked past a room and heard Megan crying, Claire telling her to pull it together and reminding her that no one can ever know. Sam said at the time, he thought it was about a boyfriend or some teenage drama. But now it made sense. He told me the rest. Megan had fallen for a teacher in high school. He was married. When she got pregnant, he cut her off completely. Claire stepped in and told Megan to leave town for a while. Claire told the rest of the family that they were adopting a child from a distant cousin who couldn't care for it. There were no legal documents, just a story people were expected to believe. I pulled out the folder with my birth certificate, the original one listing Megan as my mother, and handed it to him. He stared at it for a long time, then nodded. "You need to show the others," he said. "It's time." The next evening, just after dinner, there was a knock at my door. It was a family friend, someone who had helped Claire with event planning. She handed me a note from Claire. It was short. "I think we should talk. Just you and me. Let's clear the air before this spreads even further." I wrote back one sentence and gave it to the messenger. "I'll meet you, but in public, and only if you answer every question without spin." The note was delivered. The date was set. The conversation was coming. I picked the cafe on purpose. It was in the middle of town, full of big windows and small tables. No corner booths, no shadows, no way to twist the moment into something dramatic. The barista behind the counter recognized me from college and waved as I walked in. I nodded back and scanned the room. Claire was already there. She sat near the window, hands wrapped around a teacup, eyes locked on the table. She didn't look up when I sat across from her. I didn't waste time. "Why did you lie about being my mother for 15 years? She took a breath, said it was to protect Megan, that I was never supposed to know, and the plan was always to tell me later. I asked when later was supposed to be, because I was 22 now, and no one ever even came close. She said Megan couldn't handle motherhood, that she, Claire, had to take charge to hold the family together. If people knew Megan had a baby at 17 with a married man, it would have ruined her career. And if people thought Claire was infertile, it would have ruined her marriage. I reminded her of the years of school records under her name, of having to call her mom and Megan auntie in front of classmates, of not being allowed to put family photos in lockers. All of it was about Claire's image, not mine. She slipped for a second and said, "We gave you a better life." I asked, "Better for who?" There was a pause. I changed the topic, asked why the college savings accounts had her name on them. She didn't deny it, said they were reallocated during a financial emergency when her husband's job was at risk. She never paid it back. That was when I started to see the full picture. I wasn't just a secret, I was leverage. She used me to secure loans, to look like a stable parent on paper, to help keep her marriage together. I asked if Megan ever agreed to that. Claire said Megan didn't want to be a mother anyway, that she was relieved not to have to raise me. I leaned in and asked her straight, so I was just a prop? Something to fix your marriage and polish your reputation? Claire's face cracked, but not with guilt, with frustration. "I kept that secret for 20 years, she said. "For what? For it all to fall apart now because you couldn't leave it alone?" I stood up, pulled my coat over my shoulders. "You didn't ruin your life," I told her. "You just got caught trying to steal mine." She didn't follow me out. I left her there, still holding the tea she hadn't touched, surrounded by strangers who didn't know the story, but wouldn't forget the look on her face if they saw it. 3 days after I walked out of the cafe, I found an envelope in my mailbox. No return address. No handwriting on the front except mine. Inside was a folded letter, and nothing else. It was from Megan, not an apology, not a plea, just her version of the truth, written in clean, sharp lines like she'd been holding it in for years. She started at the beginning. She met my father when she was 17. He was 34, a respected teacher, married. She got pregnant halfway through the school year. When she told him, he didn't argue. He just told her to disappear, quietly, permanently. Claire stepped in, told Megan she'd handle it. Megan was moved to a small rented cottage outside town under the excuse of studying abroad early. She wasn't allowed visitors, no calls. Claire came to pick me up 2 days after I was born. Megan said she truly believed Claire would adopt me legally, and that she'd be allowed to stay in my life, as herself. She thought she'd be introduced as my young mother who made a brave decision. That never happened. Instead, Claire told her to stay away, said it would confuse me, said it would ruin Claire's new image. Megan was warned not to show affection in public, not to attend school functions, and definitely not to call herself my mom. She followed the rules. For years. Suddenly, 100 little things from my childhood clicked. The way Megan used to leave the room during class events, how she stood at the back of recitals. Now, she never hugged me in public. The letter said she watched me grow up from across the room, that she wanted to speak, but every time she opened her mouth, the fear won. Claire made it clear she'd cut her off completely if she ever crossed that line. When Megan married, her husband never knew about me. She kept me out of their home, out of their holiday cards, out of every corner of her new life. She wrote, "I lived 2 lives, and neither one was really mine." There was a line near the end that stuck: "I didn't just lose you once. I lost you every time I stayed silent." She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't ask me to reach out. She ended it with, "If you never want to see me again, I understand. But I needed you to know the truth came too late, and I'm sorry for that." I read it once, then again, slowly, tracing her handwriting with my finger. I didn't cry. I didn't respond. I folded it back along the original creases and placed it in a drawer at the back of my closet. Next to it, I placed the photo my grandmother had given me, the one of Megan in a hospital gown, holding me, red-eyed and tired. The photo she never got to frame. That night, I logged into my university portal and submitted a request to reprint my degree. I attached a copy of my birth certificate and filled out the reason, legal identity correction. It was the first time I'd ever asked for anything under my real name. No Claire, no lies. Just Fallon, Megan's daughter. The truth didn't fix anything, but it gave me something I never had before, a start. 3 weeks later, a flat white envelope arrived with the university seal. Inside was my reissued degree, printed with my full legal name, no borrowed last name, no altered guardianship, no lie buried in the margins. It was the first official document that finally matched who I'd always been. Claire didn't try to contact me after the cafe meeting. Not once. No calls. No texts. Not even through mutual relatives. She hadn't found closure. She just lost control, and I think she understood that reaching out now wouldn't give it back. A single short email came from Megan. It arrived one morning before work. Just one line: "Thank you for reading the letter. I won't bother you again." I didn't reply. I archived it. I didn't post updates anywhere. I stopped explaining myself to people who asked why I'd skipped Thanksgiving or why I wasn't attending my cousin's wedding. Most people had already heard anyway. No one brought it up. But Megan and Claire's names quietly disappeared from future guest lists. I signed a lease on a small studio apartment near the edge of town. Nothing fancy. A secondhand couch, a small kitchenette, and one large window that caught the evening light. I picked every item inside. No borrowed furniture, no framed lies, just mine. On the shelf by the window, I placed one photo. Megan in a hospital gown, holding a newborn wrapped in a faded pink blanket. That image had followed me through every version of the truth I'd been told. Now, it sat quietly where it belonged. Not as forgiveness, just as fact. The first-year anniversary of the speech, I stayed home, cooked myself dinner, lit one candle, said nothing. It wasn't a celebration. It was a marker. This is the year it became mine. No reunions, no second chances, just my life, unhidden, whole, and finally mine to keep.